Anyway, I thought that was nice.
How are you? Somebody sitting here. But this one might be reserved. We're gonna change seats. I knew Alan. I'm sorry, let's go with there. Yes. How are you? Hey, how's out there? Where is that? Hey, I know, but I mean, where? Right. What is he doing in the house?
I guess I could.
What?
That's what I said. I said it's like that.
I did.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. We We want to thank the Katz family, Diane and Sam, who sponsored this or are inspiring this year in memory of Sam's beloved uncle. We welcome all the Katz family here. You just have to rub it in our faces that your Kohen said it. We get it. For all those Kohanim that are not Katzes, I don't know. Maybe we should talk about it. Just kidding. But Uri Katz, his Neshama Shabbat Aliyah, his memory should be blessed. Amen. Before I introduce Rabbi Lebowitz, I also just want to bring something up that was sent to me by another fellow Kohen. That was Alan Essner, just yesterday. He sent me the following. Because as I alluded to in the flyer when Rabbi Klinger and I kind of put the flyer together, we said that this year also was inspired by many Kohanim, all the Kohanim throughout the community. We've been talking about this for you collectively. I remember Richie also worked on an initiative, right? It finally happened. It finally happened. So last year, Barry Karen, he's right there. I saw him 3 times today, not that one. And he wrote as follows, October 4th, 2022. Shalom Chaverim. For years, we have spoken about having a class centered around our Kohanic duties. I'm not sure about the grammar there, but alas, it has yet to happen. I came across the attached in a book of discourses by Soloveitchik called On Repentance. Given the season and the number of times we'll be acting as conduits for Hashem's blessings to our community over the next few days and weeks, I thought it worthwhile to send out. Beautiful. Wishing you all an easy and meaningful fast and a household full of love, Barry. Responds none other than Howard Aubrey, who sent to the Chevra of Kohanim. Says Howard, who had just had his surgery, right before Rosh Hashanah. Thanks for sending this. And I totally agree that a class on Birchat Kohanim would be beneficial to us all. Many of us have diverse minhagim, and hopefully we can have our first class soon. Gemar Chatima Tova. It should be a good year for us all, Howard. As we know, we remembered Howard this morning here in the shul, and the class is happening as he had wanted. I read that. I was at the Shiva house with the boys after Mincha Marv. I read that to them and told them I was coming here for Rabbi Lebowitz's shir on Kohanim, and this stuff doesn't just happen. There's a neshama. There's a holiness to that neshama. There's Hashem in the world that guides all of the things that happen to us. And I want to thank everyone that put their efforts in to making this happen. We will also dedicate this year to the Hilui Nishmas Tzvi Michael ben Raphael HaKohen. We are privileged to have with us the first time. I'm sorry. There's going to be more. Rabbi Aryeh Lebowitz. Rabbi Lebowitz and I went to MTA together. And clearly he did much better than I did in school. Rabbi Lebowitz is the director of Smicha at the Rabbi Isaac Elchanan Theological Seminary, as well as the Marda Asra of Beis HaKnesses of North Woodmere, previously taught at Landis College for Men, and an 11th grade Rebbe at DRS. Represent, there we go, right there, in the family.
My son-in-law.
Rabbi Lebowitz grew up in the 5 towns and studied at Yeshiva Kerem B'Yavneh, and developed a close relationship with the Rabbi Silver, taught him his derech halimud, and encouraged him to pursue a career in Klei Kodesh. And upon returning from Eretz Yisrael, YU, Cy Sims, and now we know of Rabbi Lebowitz from his fame of his halacha, his halacha bites that are all over YU Torah, his hundreds, probably at this point thousands of shiurim all over YU Torah, and really just the incredible cutting edge and practical and relevant insights into halacha that Rabbi Lebowitz brings to the table. It is an absolute honor and a pleasure to have Rabbi Lebowitz.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rabbi Morgenstern. Birchat. It is so wonderful to be with you tonight.
And so wonderful to be here in Scarsdale for the first time. I've heard so much about the great work that Rabbi Morgenstern, my old friend for many, many decades already, has been doing here, and how lovely this community is. I've been to many of the neighboring communities, and it's wonderful to finally be here with you. I have to say I'm extremely moved by what I just heard in terms of how this year is happening, Dafka, on this night after the person who requested it is enjoying it from Shemayim, and it should be an Aliyas Neshama to him, and it should be an Aliyas Neshama to Uri Katz, Zichrono Livracha, and the Katz families, to their credit, that this year is happening. Now, it is somewhat unusual for this time of year, meaning I've been fortunate enough to be able to share Torah in a number of different places over the past couple of weeks, and everyone has always wanted the same thing. They wanted tshuva, inspiration, something nice to light a fire under me. And here we have like this very technical halachic topic, and I'm very moved by that, because that's what makes my heart sing. Like in technical halacha, for many other people, it's like, that's dry, and it's like, to me, that's like the most exciting thing in the world. That's like what gets me going in the morning. So it's extremely exciting for me to be here sharing some Torah and some halacha relating to this very important topic of Birchat Kohanim, which the timing couldn't be better, because here in Chutz La'aretz, unless you're Sephardic, the season that we do more Birchat Kohanim than any other season is right now, during this time period. Before we get into the halacha, I just want to say one little piece of machshava or hashkafa relating to Birchas Kohanim. I remember many years ago, I was at my aunt and uncle's house in Rehovot. My aunt already passed away, my aunt Shalom and I noticed on the shelf in their house, they had a sefer called, what's the name of the sefer? I forgot already the name of the sefer, but it was written by the author of Torah Tamima, and it was a sefer on Chumash. Yeah, Baruch Halevi Epstein, but he has a sefer on Chumash, not Torah Tamima, another sefer of just parts on Chumash, of little Divrei Torah on Chumash. I don't remember the name of the sefer, but I just pulled it off the shelf randomly, and I opened up to a random page, figuring let's see what's here. And I came across the most beautiful vart relating to Birchas Kohanim, and he points out that there's an unusual phrasing in the Birchas Kohanim. We bless the Kohanim, bless the people. I shouldn't say we. I'm not a Kohen. The Kohanim bless the people that we should have Yasein Lecha Shalom, that we should have Shalom. We should have a sense of peace in Klal Yisrael, among the Jewish people. And he said, it's just unusual that we say V'yasein Lecha Shalom. V'yasein means, and we should be placed upon you. I don't know, you should have peace. You should experience peace. You should be peaceful toward each other. Of course, in our Shmona Esrei, we also use a similar expression of Sim Shalom. What is this lashon of V'yasein? And where does this come from? So what he suggests as follows, he puts together a few different Gemaras, a few different Armakomos, but it's based on the following idea. He says, Shalom is not all that elusive. Peace is not all that elusive. It just normally comes in one of two ways. One way that peace comes very often is when we have a common enemy. That if two people have a common enemy, then even if they don't have that much in common, and even if maybe they wouldn't get along with each other normally, but then in their joint battle against their common enemy, they find similar values, and they find room to get along with each other. Another place that shalom often comes from is that we're nowhere near the people that we have to get along with. It's very easy to get along with people that you don't have to put up with all the time. Meaning, as long as I love all of the Jews in Israel because I live in America. So I'm praying for them. I want their welfare and their safety. The Jew that cut me off with a double park and took that Jew, I don't have so much patience for. But the one, are there no Israeli Jews that are also double parking and that are also cutting people up? If you've ever driven in Israel, yes, there are. But as long as I'm far away, then I feel a sense of shalom. So the Torah Tamima quotes a Gemara that says, when in relation to the placement of the ashes next to the Mizbeach in the Beis Hamikdash, that the lashon of sima, of placing, is used by the ashes to tell me, the Gemara says that when you place the ashes, it has to be benachas and shelo b'pizu. What does that mean? It has to be placed gently and also not scattered, where it's gathered together. So says the Tarshima, wait, if the word v'yasein or sin, when it comes to the ashes, means that it should be placed benachas, in a gentle manner, and shelo b'pizu, when they're not scattered, maybe that's what it means when we bless v'yasein l'cha shalom, that the shalom that we hope for should be even if things are benachas, and we don't have any common enemies, and there's no anti-Semitism, and there's no one attacking us, and we still get along with each other. And even when we are shalom b'pizu, when we're not scattered all over the place, when we're very close together, when we're in close proximity to each other, that there should still be shalom. And that's the highest level of shalom, when you don't have the two normal factors that lead to shalom, and you still have shalom, even if there's no enemy, and even if you're not scattered all over the place, even if we're not scattered at different ends of the world, that we still feel a sense of shalom. I remember I was once on a Pesach program, and I guess it's an old line, but it was the first time I had heard it. Someone said to me at the end of Pesach, someone said, after spending 8 days together with my entire family, I realized that I really, really love my family. I don't like them at all, but I love them very, very much. And sometimes people get that sense that when things are too close, when everyone's very close, it's harder to feel that sense of shalom. So the ultimate bracha that we have with Nesias Kapayim, with Birchas Kohanim, and that perhaps we should all have in mind, is that we're living in a time, every time, but really particularly now, where the Jewish people need a little more shalom. In Eretz Yisrael in particular, we need a lot more shalom, and it's something that we should have in mind as we're receiving this wonderful bracha, that the shalom should come even when there's no common enemy, and even when we're in very close proximity to each other, and no matter what the circumstances, to recognize the greatness in each other and to be able to see the goodness in each other as well, and to feel that sense of shalom. Now, having said that, as an introduction, I asked Rabbi Morgenstern, are there any questions that you want me to address? Meaning, Birchas Kohanim is a very big sugya. It is one siman in Shulchan Aruch, but it's like one of the longest simanim in all of Shulchan Aruch. If you open up a Mishnah Berurah in Kuf Chav Ches, the very first siman in the second volume of Mishnah Berurah, it's ginormous. In fact, this past summer I was in Camp Kaylee, and I have a group of young men that I learned with. They learn all day there. It's a bunch of 18, 19-year-old young men, and they're learning 3 stars a day, morning to night. And we learned Birchas Kohanim for a full month. We learned. I assume that's why you were reaching out to me, because I was in Camp Kaylee and I get a text from Rabbi Morgan saying, "Well, you want to come to the community and give a share of Birchas Kohanim?" I'm like, "Oh, I guess he's supposed to." Oh, you know, okay. So I guess he's following me. I was like, "Oh, what?" So there's so much to say. So Morgenstern was kind enough to collect, I assume submitted by people, or did you make up the question? I don't know. I know that when Roshafter came to my community, I said, I gave everyone the opportunity to submit the questions for the Q&A, and then I wrote all the questions. So I don't know if that's what happened every year, but if they were submitted or when they were written by you, whatever it was, maybe we'll just go through them one by one. Some of them will be quicker answers, some of them a little bit slower, but one of the things that maybe I won't even go in order that they're submitted, but in order of, I don't know, random order. Someone had submitted a question where they asked, I think this is important to know, it's important to realize, someone had asked if there is a problem. They've noticed that in certain places, the kihila, or certain members of the congregation, turn away from the Kohanim. You see, we've all been frightened by a particular Maimar Chazal that many of us heard first when we were young children. And that is that if one looks at the hands of the Kohanim during Birchas Kohanim, anyone know how it ends? Oh, you'll be blind, right? So you become, so no one wants to be blind. What a terrible thing. So we do whatever we can not to look at the hands of the Kohanim. So there are some people that you'll notice will actually turn their back on the Kohanim, will turn their back away from the Kohanim during Birchas Kohanim. Many others, most others, will cover their eyes. or will avert their gaze, will look downward. Men will often put a talus over their head, and if they have children, they'll gather their children under the talus. By the way, if you're wondering whether the Arizona desert is the hottest place on earth, it isn't. That valley is not hot. The hottest place on earth is under Daddy's talus during Birchas Kohanim. That is like you can't breathe. It's thick air, but that's where. But still, it's when you think back, to that experience as a child, it still brings up warm feelings in a good way. And we have this practice. The question is it really necessary? So not only is it not necessary to turn away from Kohanim, but the opposite might in fact be true. Not might, the opposite is in fact true. Meaning the halacha is, and it's explicit in the Gemara, it's interesting, the sugyas of Birchas Kohanim all appear in Maseches Sota. Because Maseches Sota, what is it doing in Maseches Sota? Maseches Sota is a Masechta that has a perek of Eilu Nemar and B'Kol Lashon, that certain things you're allowed to say in any language, and other things you're allowed to say only in Lashon HaKodesh, only in the original Hebrew. So since on that list, Birchas Kohanim is one of the items on the list, all of the sugyas of Birchas Kohanim happen to appear in Maseches Sota. Birchas Kohanim has nothing to do with a Sota, which is an entirely different section of the Torah. If I were, when they put me in charge of Judaism, I'm going to, take Birchas Kohanim and I'm going to put it in Maseches Megillah. It makes much more sense to put in Maseches Megillah because there's a similar Mishnah Megillah. It doesn't talk about what could be written, what could be said in any language, but it talks about mitzvos that are done during the day can be done all day. At any time during the daylight hours, those mitzvahs can be done. And on that list is Birchas Kohanim. So Maseches Megillah, which talks about Kriyas HaTorah, and talks a lot about Tefillah, and talks about Megillah, that's where I would have included Birchas Kohanim, and that's earlier in Shas than Maseches Sota. I don't know why it happens to come up in Maseches Sota, but that's where all the sugyas are. The Gemara is pretty explicit that you're not allowed to turn away from the Kohanim. You're not allowed to turn your back to the Kohanim during Birchas Kohanim. And think about it. It's a basic derech eretz. If someone is blessing you, it's not polite, it's not proper to turn away from somebody who's blessing you. You want to receive the blessing and you want to show that you're eager to receive the blessing. So it's proper, especially in light of the fact that there is an opinion of the Sefer Charedim, one of the great Rishonim, who writes, mitzvah levarich kohenes Yisrael, v'Yisrael ha'omdim panim keneged pnei ha'kohanim bishtika, when a Yisrael is standing face to face with the Kohanim, silently, umechavnim libam lekabel berchasim kedvar Hashem, and has in mind to receive the bracha as God commanded, heim nami bechlal hamitzvah. They're also included in the mitzvah. So in case there are other people like me over here who are not Kohanim, and you're thinking, well, is this shir really for me? According to the Sefer Charedim, absolutely this shir is really for you. Because according to the Sefer Charedim, just like the Kohanim have a mitzvah to be mivarech the Jewish people, we have a mitzvah to be misparech, to receive the bracha, to show up for the bracha. I'll tell you, there are gedolei Torah that when they come from Eretz Yisrael, many Torah giants, when they come to visit America, will only daven in Sephardic minyanim. Ashkenazi Torah giants that will only daven at a Sephardic shul because they're going to give up the chance of Birchas Kohanim. So you'll struggle with the words a little bit, and you'll not know what's going on. Sometimes when an Ashkenazi davens in a Sephardic shul, it's a little confusing. I would imagine it would be true the other way around also. I remember my grandfather's my grandfather just passed away this year. It was my great hero in life. So when he was in his 90s already, my family and I were in Yerushalayim for Shabbos, and we convinced him, he lived in Rehovot, we convinced him to spend Shabbos with us in Yerushalayim, even though it wasn't easy for him to move around so much, but he wanted to spend Shabbos with us. So, and it was the most beautiful Shabbos to spend together with my grandfather's bracha in Yerushalayim. But I didn't want him to have to walk to shul. So in the building where we were renting an apartment, there was a minyan, a Sephardi minyan on the ground floor of the building. So on Friday night, we davened at the Sephardi minyan. And afterwards, when we went up to have our Shabbos meal, my grandfather said, "Do you think it would be possible for us to daven at an Ashkenazi shul tomorrow?" I said, "Yeah, sure, no problems. I just didn't want you to have to schlep. I didn't want you to have to walk." He said, and my grandfather was the sweetest. He said, I love Sephardi people. I love them so much. I didn't know whether to dance or to sing or to stand or to sit. I was just totally lost. I had no idea what to do at any point. But one thing we know that Sephardim do in Chutz La'aretz is that they do Birchas Kohanim each and every day. So there are many Gedolei Torah when they come to America will want to receive that bracha. They'll want to be the recipients of that bracha. There are other Gedolei Torah that live in America that once a week they'll sneak into a Sephardi minyan just to receive that bracha. People I know that do that all the time just to be recipients of that bracha. So it's very worthwhile. And if you turn away, you're showing that you're not interested in the bracha. What about looking at the Kohanim? Are you allowed to look at the Kohanim? So I have a Rebbe, my great Rabbi, Moreno Agon Rav Schachter Shlita, the Rosh Kollel in the Yeshiva University. I've been with him while Birchas Kohanim was going on, and I look at him, and he's looking right at the Kohanim. I want to go over to him and say, like, Rabbi, you're going to go blind. Like, you can't do that. Like that, you're not supposed to be doing that. So he explained to me that the practice of not looking at the Kohanim, there's no issue to look at the Kohanim. You're not allowed to look at the hands of the Kohanim, and the hands of the Kohanim are the conduits through which the Shekhinah comes to bless the Jewish people. That's also an important point that maybe we should come back to. It is not the Kohen who is blessing the Jewish people. The Kohen is serving as the conduit for God's blessing of the Jewish people. Some people, when they hear that, Kohanim, when they hear that, feel like, oh, that's all I am. Others say, no, that's even better. Meaning, it could be my bracha, or I could be the conduit of God's bracha. And that's a much greater thing. And that's why, by the way, if you have a Kohen who does all sorts of averos, things that are against the Torah, he still does Birchas Kohanim. If it's something against his kahuna, he doesn't do Birchas Kohanim. But if he does averos, things that are against the Torah, there are 365 things you're not allowed to do in the Torah. If you have a Kohen who, let's say, the example given, the Rambam gives is he violates Giloy Arayos. I'm not going to translate everything, but he violates some pretty serious Isurim. He's still allowed to do Birchas Kohanim. But that's terrible. He's a terrible brother. How can he do this? Because it's not his bracha. He's the conduit through which Hashem sends the bracha. So as long as he honors his kahuna and he doesn't violate some avera that shows disrespect to his very kahuna, the bracha can work through the kohen. The bracha works through the conduit that is the kohen. But that shechina rests on the hands of the kohanim, and it used to be the practice that kohanim would stick their hands out of the talus. And the reason for that practice was that to not entice the kohanim to look at their own hands. So they'd be under the talus and their hands would be outside of the talus so that they wouldn't look, because they're also not allowed to look at their hands. But nowadays, the much more common practice is that Kohanim cover their hands with the talus. So when you look at the Kohanim, you're not looking at their hands. And Rav Schachter said, it's derech eretz. Someone's giving you a bracha, you look at the person that's giving you a bracha. So I'm looking at them, and there's no problem with looking at them when their hands are covered with the talus. I've done that a few times. Once I did it, and there was a Kohen with his hands outside the talus. So my eyesight's going a little bit, but one time there was a Kohen. I don't think that's a common practice. I don't think that's what you're supposed to do. But that's what that particular. Try to tell the Kohen that he should do differently than he's doing. It doesn't work. These are traditions and families. These are things that people grew up with. It doesn't. I've tried once or twice to tell somebody, the way you're holding your arms, it's a little too low. You got to raise your arm. This is the way my father held his arms. It's the way my grandfather held his arms. So you can't always. But tell us why. Yeah. It's funny. I once went to visit. I was in Passaic, New Jersey, once in Rav Yonason Sachs's shul, and he was giving me a tour of his shul, and it was fairly newly built, and the women's section is in a balcony in the back with a one-way glass. So the women have a really great view of everything, much better than any view on the floor level, because from a bird's eye view you can see everything. And he said that it was a great idea, the one-way glass, and the women were very happy with Mechitza. So the problem is that now he gets phone calls all the time. woman calls him up and says, "Can you tell my husband to stop talking during Kaddish?" I see him schmoozing the whole time with his friends. So so that was the only downside. So you're right. Maybe you can tell the wife, you'll get somewhere. So anyway, so as far as the question of what you should be doing, it certainly should not be turning away. That's clearly against halacha. It could be you're even allowed to look. The more common prevalent practice is that you go under the talis or you avert your eyes down toward the machzor and don't look directly, but you're supposed to be facing the Kohanim. So much so that the amsha acharei HaKohanim, the Gemara talks about the people who are behind the Kohanim are not included in the bracha. So in many shuls, for example, we have rows of seats that go all the way to the front wall, and the Kohanim, let's say, are standing here, and there are people that are sitting there, so they're not supposed to stay there when the Kohanim are giving their bracha. They're supposed to go in front of the Kohanim in order to receive the bracha. So that's as far as that question is concerned. We're not going to get to what's my time? What are the sponsors? What's the time? What time should you'll tell me. Okay, so another question that was, and by the way, if anyone has any questions that they'd like to submit now, on the phone.
Yeah, a quick question. If there were 10 Kohanim made up the minyan,
yeah,
and there's nobody for us to be Mavarech to, do we still do it?
So the Gemara actually talks about that question explicitly. When would that ever come up? Family reunion or something like that, right? When there's a family of Kohanim that gets together. So the Gemara says that if there are 10, then they're all Mavarech. They all do the Birchat Kohanim. But the Mim Mavarech, who are they giving the bracha to? La'am shebesados. The assumption is that the bracha works for anyone in that city. And in fact, I think it was maybe the Chidad, when he went to Eretz Yisrael, wrote a letter to his family that now that I'm in Eretz Yisrael, there's Birchat Kohanim every day, and I'm having in mind that the bracha should go for all of you back home. Now, it's not so clear that works. Am shebesados likely means the people in that community who, for whatever reason, weren't able to make it to shul. It's also not so clear that the Am shebesados is receiving the mitzvah of Birchas Kohanim. They're not in fulfillment of the commandment to receive the bracha, but they are receiving some element of the bracha itself, some of the blessing.
What happens if there's no Levim to do the washing?
So there's no Levim, so anyone know the halacha? If there's no Levim, so then we look for a Bechor, firstborns would do the washing of the hands. And that is obviously much more complicated. It's funny, what happens if there's no Levi in shul and it's Kriyas HaTorah day? So what do? The Kohen gets 2 aliyahs, gets a second aliyah. You know who's shocked whenever I share that halacha? A Levi. They're always like, well, what do you do when we're not there? Because they've never seen it. They've never been there when there hasn't been a Levi there because they're Levian. So they're like, well, what is going on when we're not there? It's like, they can't even imagine that such a thing happens. But for those of us who are not Levian, we see that all the time. Because Levian are not so common.
2 things. First of all, is it possible to say if it was named Baruch Shama?
So Baruch Sha'amar is right.
Right.
He has a couple of Svarim Baruch Sha'amar. Tefillah is what one is pointed out. And I think he's got one in Pirkei Avos. It's also called Baruch Sha'amar. He has a sefer called Makar Baruch, which is a 4-volume autobiography. And from that sefer Makar Baruch, the art school a number of years ago published an abridged version of it called My Uncle the Netziv. Because Tzartzvim was a nephew of the Netziv, so they took out the parts about the Netziv, translated it, and published a short biography called My Uncle the Netziv, and they sent it out as like a fundraiser on behalf of a Lakewood cheder or something. And then 2 weeks later, they sent out, please send back the copies of My Uncle the Netziv. It's contraband. You're not allowed to have it. So then everyone knew to hold on to it tight, because once a book is banned, then that's a book you want to have. No one was going to read it otherwise. It was like it's a tzedakah mailing, no one was going to. But as soon as they heard it was banned, why? What's banned? What's good in here? What's that?
I have a real question also.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Is there a basis for different customs for the Kohanim? I was talking to my father. He never left his seat until like Ritzeh was called out. But I see other Kohanim in our shul. They will, I don't know if they're eager to get a particular spot on the beam or whatever, I'm not going to say what. Abraham. They're just like,
Yeah. So there's
Right
a little
away.
push and pull over here. Because on the one hand, the Kohen has to be, the Gemara says the Kohen has to be Oker Ragrov, I would say. And if he's not Oker Ragrov, meaning Oker Ragrov means he has to be on the move. He has to be going toward the direction of Duchemin, I would say. And if he doesn't, then he can't do it. He can't do it. So he's got to be on the move like that. On the other hand, we don't want to create too much of a hefsek between when he washes his hands, too much of an interruption between when he washes his hands and when he actually does Birchat Kohanim. So some Kohanim, and maybe this is the practice in your family, like right up, say they'll go on the move. Others, as soon as Kiddush is over, will immediately go wash their hands, maybe to jockey for position. There is a machlokas. It's true. This is the way it is. There is a machlokas. By the way, the word duchening, where does that come from? So the duchen is the platform. They're omeid al haduchen. So it's the platform that's set up in front of the shul. In many shuls, they don't have a platform, certainly in shtibels and things like that. I imagine in this shul in Main Sanctuary, there's a nice platform, but that's what the duchen is, that they're omeid al haduchen. There is a machlokas, what it means to be oker raglov. Does it mean that you have to be headed already up to the duchen, or that you're even headed back to the washing station, as long as you're on the way, on the path that ultimately is going to get you there? So that's a machlokas. So some might be makbid to already be on the way up. Once had a shaila where a kohen there was a minyan with no kohen. It was in the Israel Woodmere, and they have Israel Woodmere is a very large shul.
So the Ritzeh is not so much of a queue, but it's like the latest time.
Right. So there was in the Israel there was something like 10 minyanim that go on simultaneously, and one of the minyanim didn't have a kohen. So someone realized in the middle of the Shas, they went to grab a kohen from another minyan. So he had been oker ragla from that other minyan, I would say, but he hadn't even been in the room where this Birchat Kohanim was going to happen, I would say. So they weren't sure what to do, whether that counts or not. So Rabbi Shai Shechter, after Yantiv, called his father, Rabbi Shechter Shlita, and he said, "Oh yeah, it's a Magen Avraham." Sometimes he just astonishes with the memory of details. He said, "Yeah, it's machlokes between Magen Avraham and whatever." Like immediately, he knew whether how to resolve. I don't remember even what he said, but he remembered. He knew immediately how to resolve that issue. Now, one thing you may notice about Birchat Kohanim, and one of the questions that was submitted.
Let's do more of the submitted, and then
we'll leave over there. So one of the questions that was submitted was why there's no singing on Shabbos, meaning during the week when we have a Yom Tov that falls out during the week. So the Kohanim sing this whole niggin. In the minhag in some shuls is to sing one niggin, in other shuls is another niggin, in other shuls is to fight about which niggin to sing. But there are a couple of I asked Cantor Beer, who is out of our cantorial school in Yeshiva University, which one is more authentic. Because I once heard Kohanim arguing about which niggin to use, and one of them said, the one that I used was sung in the Beis Hamikdash. And the other one said, you can't possibly know that. He said, what do you mean? I do know that my father told me, and his father told him, and his father told him. And I'm confident that, so Cantor Beer says that they're both legitimate, that they both have old roots, and so there are a couple of popular nigunim, but we don't have this elongated niggin when it comes to Shabbos. So it seems that what that's based on is the fact that we don't say those extra paragraphs in between the three sections on Shabbos. Why do we not say those extra paragraphs? So there is a discussion. The Shulchan Aruch says in Hilchos Shabbos that you're not supposed to be mevakesh tzrachav on Shabbos, that one is not supposed to put in personal requests in their tefillah on Shabbos. And those paragraphs are personal requests. So we skip them on Shabbos. Now it's fascinating because it's not so clear that you're allowed to do personal requests on Yom Tov. That's a machlokas also. That's a dispute as well. The Shulchan Aruch writes in Hilchos Yom Tov, it's in Tavkov Ayin Vav, ubekol makom ein misanin velo zoakim velo matriim b'Shabbos v'Yom Tov al shum tzara. You don't cry out, you don't fast, you don't do any of these kinds of things where you're pleading with the Kodesh Baruch Hu for something personal on Shabbos or on Yom Tov. And it sounds like you're not supposed to do it even on Yom Tov. However, the Magen Avraham writes in Hilchos Birchat Kohanim that the reason that he writes even that there used to be a practice that they didn't do Birchat Kohanim on Shabbos at all, that they would just skip Birchat Kohanim on Shabbos. And the reason they would skip Birchas Kohanim is because people were in the habit that when they're doing Birchas Kohanim, that they say those tefillos. So in order to prevent people from saying those tefillos, they skip the Birchas Kohanim entirely on Shabbos. So that's incorrect. We reject that. We still Birchas Kohanim is a mitzvah d'oraisa. We want to grab onto that. We don't want to forego the mitzvah d'oraisa because of a potential rabbinic violation of asking for something personal on Shabbos. But we at least skip that part on Shabbos. You know, there's some people when they bench after their meal on Shabbos that they stop at Aryeh Chasreinu and they don't say all the harachmans.
They're just lazy.
So why don't they say all the, hey, yeah, that's me. Why don't they say all the harachmans? Because you're not supposed to ask for personal needs on Shabbos. The joke in my family was that my kids say, they're in the gym working out, and someone walks by and says, "How much do you bench?" And they say, "Just a lot of chasreinu." But that's on Shabbos. So we're not supposed to be back at Shabbos. I actually received an email from another Rav this just yesterday asking that the first three harachmans aren't really bakashas shvachim. So you should be able to say the first three harachmans. I noticed my Rabbi Rav Shechter Shlita, when he benches, first of all, he benches very slowly. So you always get the impression he must be saying benching twice, but really he's saying a shorter benching than the rest of us. It just takes him longer to finish it. So, but I noticed that when he gets Aryeh Chasreinu, he'll maybe say a harachman or two or three, but not the ones that are bakashas shvachim. He'll say b'amaro milandu, and and then he'll finish benching because those are not asking for personal requests. I always told my kids growing up, and they thought like, because Rav Shechter only stops Aryeh Chasreinu, we can also. I always said only if you finish at the same time that everybody else finishes. Meaning say the words. Sometimes, by the way, it's a good Kabbalah for the new year. There are certain things that are almost universal that shuls say them too fast. There are certain things, I'm not making any accusations in this shul. I know what happens in my shul and every other shul I've ever been to, but I've doubted that. Brich Shemay, when they take out the Torah. There's no way you can say all those Aramaic words and you're not just talking a lot. Baruch Hashem b'olam hamiv yamein and Mari between Ashkivenu and Shmona Esrei. There's not a man on earth or woman on earth that is able to say the words as quickly as the amount of time that long tachum on Monday and Thursday, right? There are certain things. There's just no way. When it comes to long tachum, my Rabbi says 1/3 of it each time. I say 2/3 because I'm a Davener Sloviasim. I'm better at reading Hebrew apparently. No, I'm just joking. but to say some section of the long tachum, and I would put in that category the third of the paragraphs that we have in Birchas Kohanim in between. The Kohanim are singing, and we're singing this whole long Ihiratzon, and especially if you have to figure out which family members you have. Wait, I still have the Aim, and Banai, and Panosai, and you try to fit in everybody. Wait, is it my grandchild there? No grandchildren in that tefillah, right? You're just trying to figure it all out, and it's very hard to finish that tefillah in time. It might be a good idea for a person to say, you know what, Yetzer Hara, I'm going to give you one. I'm going to stop saying Baruch Hashem Yom Amiv Yamein at Mariv, and I'm just going to say Hashkivenu really slowly, and actually, focus. Or I'm going to stop saying the Harachmans, on Shabbos. But I'm just going to say the first four brachos of benching, really slowly and with real focus and with real concentration. There's an expression: Tov ma'at b'kavana, meharbe shalom b'kavana. Better to do a little bit with kavana than a lot without kavana. Slichos. It's a really good idea. If you can't make it through the entire paragraph because you're breaking the teeth in the unfamiliar words, say the first few stanzas of the unless you're leaving the tzibur, then you have to. But say the first few stanzas and you'll make it through something. Ma'at the kavana. How did I get to this? What question were we discussing?
Yiratzon.
Oh, the Yiratzon.
Then no singing on Shabbos.
Oh, no singing on Shabbos. Right. So that's where it came from, not to sing on Shabbos, because you don't have those tefillos. Now, if a person actually had a bad dream on Friday night, then you're allowed to say the tefillah for the dream on Shabbos. Because even though you're not supposed to ask for personal needs on Shabbos, you're also not supposed to fast on Shabbos. But the Gemara says that if you had a bad dream, you're allowed to do a tainis chalom afilu b'Shabbos. That even on Shabbos, it used to be a thing that people would do when they had a bad dream. They would fast as a way of rectifying the bad dream. It's not the common practice nowadays. Nowadays, when we have a bad dream, we just try to forget about it. But it used to be, why the difference? Meaning, halacha doesn't normally change like that. So why the difference? So I think the way the Poskim explained it is that it used to be a person would like pretty much die within 3 miles of where they were born. They weren't exposed to that much. They didn't see that. They didn't travel much. They didn't see that much. They didn't see that. So if you had something crazy that appeared to you in a dream, it might have been a message from God. If you have something crazy that appears to you in a dream now, you're probably playing too many video games, or like you've seen, or you've listened to the news, or I don't know, you've been on you've just been exposed to so much. So there are a lot of things that creep into our mind. So we always say, you know what, it's probably nothing. It's probably just something that has crept into our mind, and we should put it out of our mind. But technically speaking, if a person has a bad dream, they're allowed to say that tefillah on Shabbos. We don't do it because we typically don't know that we had a meaningfully bad dream on that Friday night. There is even a minute of the Aryeh, a minute of the Kabbalah, that they don't repeat the paragraph twice. That they say the paragraph once and they break it up. Right? After the first pasuk of Birchat Kohanim, they say the first third of the paragraph. After the second pasuk of Birchat Kohanim, the second third of the paragraph. After the third pasuk of Birchat Kohanim, the third third of the paragraph. And they don't even say the longer paragraph of the Yiratzon. Meaning the person shouldn't feel cheated if they don't get to say the whole Yiratzon. It's a much later edition, that Yiratzon. That's not from the Gemara, and many communities have practiced not say it at all. I realize that the words are somewhat meaningful. So you do have an option if you want to say it, if it's very meaningful to you. Here's what I would suggest. Again, you should ask, I should have said at the very beginning, all of these questions should really be geared to your rabbi. He's a wonderful rabbi, and you should certainly, I'm just putting out different thoughts and ideas. Rabbi Morgenstern is more than capable of advising you in terms of which way to go. But yeah, I would suggest 2 options. One possible option, if you don't have time to say the Holy Yiratzon, you find that to be a meaningful tefillah, because you're saying that I want my parents to have arichos yamim, and I want to live a long life, and I want my children to live a long life. Like, that's very meaningful for people. A lot of parts of tefillah don't feel quite as meaningful to us. Like, I don't know, when I'm davening that the Hashiva Shofteinu Kavarishona, that the judges of yesterday return, like, it doesn't mean the same to me as this so it talks to us sometimes. I'm not minimizing Shemona Esrei during the week. You need to say those words, and you need to have those words, and we should think of tricks to make them meaningful. I realize I'm a little jumpy tonight, but just by the way, a quick trick on making that bracha a meaningful, and maybe it's more meaningful to me just because of my job. I happen to be a rabbi, so I see a lot of stuff and a lot of things that I wish I didn't have to deal with. And I'm sure the Morgenstern can relate to this. Rav Aaron Lapiansky, one of the great Torah giants of America today, once suggested that when you say Hashiva Shofteinu K'Varishona, that we should have adequate judges, that we should think about how our community is capable or incapable of handling accusations of sexual assault and starting up with children and things of that nature. And Hashiva Shofteinu K'Varishona, if we only had the wisdom to know how to properly, adequately handle and punish and protect and deal with those issues in the proper way, without allowing anyone to be hurt, without allowing it's a very, very difficult thing to do. And sometimes communal leadership, with the best of intentions, can do more harm than help. And it's not a bad idea to think that Hashem should give us the wisdom to protect all members of our community, to be safe and to be. So that's what I think about Hashiva Shofteinu. Hopefully, I just changed that bracha for many of you as well. But as I was going to say, so 2 options. We're only getting through 2 questions tonight. I'm sorry. So 2 options of what you can do with that Yiratzon. One option is you can start it at the second puzzle, meaning you already said the tefillah for the dreams the first time, so you don't have to say the tefillah for the dreams twice. So you could start it on the second puzzle and then finish it on the third puzzle. So between the 2 of them, you might have enough time to actually finish it. Another option is start when the tzibur starts, stop when the Kohanim say the word shalom, listen, answer amen, and then continue. As the Kohanim say, as the Shliach tzibur saying sim shalom, you can then continue and say the Yiratzon. The downside of that second option is that really you're not supposed to be doing other things during Chazaras Hashatz. You're supposed to be focused and paying attention during Chazaras Hashatz. But it may be an option. It may not be a terrible option for those who find that tefillah meaningful. But if you have to miss it, it's really not the end of the world if you have to miss that tefillah. The main part of Kohanim is actually listening to the Kohanim. I'm not following you. It's his fault. Okay. Someone asked, let's see. Am Kadoshacha Kamar. Someone came over to me right before the shir. It says when they call Kohanim, and it says right underneath that, Am Kadoshacha Kamar. Who's that for? Who's supposed to say Am Kadoshacha Kamar? I never hear anybody say it. So who's actually? I assume the words are there for a reason, right? So who's actually supposed to say it? So the Mishnah Berurah says that the Shliach Tzibur is the one that's supposed to say it. That the Chazan is supposed to say Am Kadoshacha Kamar, and he writes that which there's a practice in some places. Shahakohanim omrim Am Kadoshacha, that the Kohanim say it, says the Mishnah Berurah, Ta'ushu. It's a mistake. It should not be done. In fact, the Sibur Yaititz, Rabbi Yaakov Emden says that even more correct is that the Tzibur will say it. Is that the congregation should say, Am Kadoshacha Kamor. You all say it?
No, not all. But some of us.
Right. And he's acknowledging. So Kohanim is to call them, because the halacha is that the Kohanim are only supposed to do them when they're called to do them. So he calls that Kohanim to call them to do them, to call them into service. And then he declares that they are Am Kadoshacha. And it's considered to be unseemly. This moment is considered to be unseemly for the Kohanim to say about themselves. Right, Am Kadoshacha Kamor. Like for them to. So I think that's why the Mishnah says Ta'us and mistake. But you do see that it's, a lot of times when you have in learning that a sefer says, and don't do this, it means because a lot of people did it. Like when Tosfos gives an answer to something, Tosfos says, and don't answer this and this, because you just have to find the Rishon that does answer, right? Because it's obvious that someone does, right? It's obvious that someone actually says it. They're not fighting against nothing. They're fighting against something that actually exists.
I think there's one time no one says that if there's less than two. Kohanim's not the right seven, and then there's
right.
Q
Then
Kohanim. I think they don't even say
right.
Kohanim.
And then it's not even Kohanim. Right.
I had that experience, and then someone said, "You're the only Kohanim." I was like, "Yeah." He says, "No one's going to give you the cue. You have to just start."
Right. It's unusual. Yeah, it's better to have two Kohanim if you can get two Kohanim up there, because again, we'd like to do it in a proper way with all the proper words.
This Rosh Hashanah, I wasn't here. I was in another state. I was the only Kohen.
Yeah.
Right. So I was thinking about this question, and it said right in the commentary of the Matzah, it said if there's only one Kohen, the better minhag is to call Kohanim, because you shouldn't change the Seder up.
There are three opinions.
Right. So I get up there. I actually went over to. I said, I don't know what you're doing. No, we call out Kohanim even if you're the only one. I get up there. The guy's not saying a word. I'm waiting. I said, okay, ready. Stand still here. So I said, I'm a guest. I went right into the bracha. As soon as I was done, the Gabbai started a fight with Gaza, and they were going back.
People are amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, say
What's
that? They're so passionate. You have to know how to be a Birchat a little bit. Like the passion of your children. So look how they want to serve you properly. Someone complained to me last week that there was someone who brought children to shul that were making too much noise in shul. I said, when I hear children making noise in shul, I try to think how my great-grandparents and my grandparents at certain points in their lives only would have loved to hear the sound of children playing in shul and what they would have given for that sound. You try to be the Birchat for a little bit. So, it's
one Kohen.
So there are three opinions. Meaning the correct thing is follow whatever the minute of that shul is. What's the minute of that? It's never happened. I think so. It's very difficult. Ideally, there should be a rabbi of the shul that makes the call, and that has the guts to make a call to say, one way or the other. But otherwise, you do what you do, and hopefully it doesn't start a fight. Apparently, that didn't work. Yeah.
What is the appropriate
the appropriate approach to chinuch for a young non-bar mitzvah kohanim. What's an appropriate age?
Okay, so this is one of the questions I was submitted. At what age should children do Birchas Kohanim? So this is interesting because this might be, I'm questioning how involved to get. In some shuls, the youngest children go up with their fathers to do, and they go under the father's so to be next to their fathers so that they can see what you're supposed to do and how it works. In many places, children do not do at all. They don't go up at all. Anyone under bar mitzvah, they just don't go up at all. So where does that come from? Where would those various minhagim come from? So there's a Mishnah in the Sechus Megillah that says, Katan Kori Betorah Umetargim Avol Eino Nosei Eskapav. That a child should not do a Mishnah. However, the Gemara in the Sechus Sukkah, when it talks about chinuch and at what age you mechanech a child for different mitzvahs, the Gemara says, well, at what age should you buy a kid a lulav, or should you give him your lulav to shake? Katan hayodei l'na'neya. If he knows how to do the wavings of the lulav, which in my experience is about the age of 30. I don't know. But if he knows how to do the waving properly of the lulav, chayav b'lulav. Lehisatev chayav b'tzitzis. If he knows how to wrap himself in a talis, he's chayav b'tzitzis. Lishmar tefillin, aviv lokech lo tefillin. If he can protect his tefillin, then his father should buy him tefillin, which is also very interesting. Right? We generally put on tefillin. So this is it's a total anomaly in halacha. The Gemara says one thing, the Shulchan Aruch says something else, and all of Klal Yisrael does something else. Right? The Gemara says as soon as he could protect his tefillin and respect them, which some kids, they're different personalities. Some kids can't do that until well past bar mitzvah. Other kids at the age of 8, they're like, they're the ones that are like well put together, and they, every hair is in place, and imagine Rabbi Morgenstern at the age of 8, right? Right? He could have put on tefillin, he would have protected the tefillin properly. So that's what the Gemara says. Shulchan Aruch says the day of the bar mitzvah, not a day early. And what do we all do? A month before, 3 months before, different practices. They say that Shlomo Zalman Auerbach used to say that there are 3 halachos of 3 that are totally made up, that don't exist. One is the child putting on tefillin 3 months before bar mitzvah doesn't exist, doesn't say that anywhere. One is, trying to remember.
Schechter, I heard of Schechter says. One is the Torah in the Torah can't
be Torah can't be moved
unless it's read 3 times for that in our own.
Yeah, and correct, right? The Torah, they can't move the Torah to a different location unless you use it 3 times. And the other one is 3 fasts before the bar mitzvah. And it doesn't exist. The idea of 3 fasts before the bar mitzvah. How much before bar mitzvah is the child supposed to fast? A Yom Kippur or 2. Yom Kippur, 2 Yom Kippurs if they're very strong and robust and capable, and 1 Yom Kippur if they're not. Just a Yom Kippur, not any of the other fasts. That's what my children did. So they were happy on the other days, not as happy on Yom Kippur. But those are 3 threes that don't exist. So the Gemara goes on to say, Rav Shechter I think once told us that his father got him tefillin when he was like 10 because he was very when he knows Lishmar Tzvi, go for things like that. But then it says, Hayodea Livos Kapav, Cholkano Truma Bebeis Agrados. And the Kohen can collect Truma that is given to Kohanim when he knows how to, when he knows how to be Boris Kapav. What do you mean when he knows how? I thought he's not supposed to do it until he's an adult. So how do we reconcile these Gemaras? On the one hand, you have a Mishnah that tells me that a Katan is not supposed to do it. On the other hand, you have a Gemara that tells me, as soon as the child knows how to do it, then he can already take Truma. So how do we resolve this? So Tosas Mesechus Megillah explains that we're mechanech ketanim to do Birchas Kohanim, but only if they're joined by an adult. Meaning, you can send up a child to do it with his father or with other adults. The child should not be the only one doing on his own. Shulchan Aruch passes lo hevi shtei sa'arot eino nos ifnei atzmo klal. That a child who's below the age of bar mitzvah, who's not yet the age of physical maturity, should not duchen alone. Aval in Kohanim shein gedolim nosei bilmod v'schalech But together with Kohanim who are Gedolim, he can be Nosei Kapov to learn and to be Mischal. There are communities that have a minhag not to do that. Hashut Pshat Shulchan Aruch is that a child can experience chinuch up there at the duchen together with his father. That's the Hashut Pshat Shulchan Aruch. But Morrison told me about the shir that that's the practice here in this shul. And that's what it says in Shulchan. Now, there are achronim that speak very forcefully against it that have an entirely different practice. And that's fine. I mean, there could be different minhagim in the Klal Yisrael. You certainly shouldn't push your own minhag if you're in a different shul. Meaning, if you're, I don't know, let's say what the Yakisha minhag is, what the Boris community does, but if you try to push your minhag, when you go visit the Rosh used to tell us that you could show them the possible minhag. They'll tell you, no, our minhag can predate Matan Torah. You're not going to be able. So it's the problem is to do the community.
I saw that with the hands. Child on your college with you.
Oh, that he shouldn't be looking at the hands.
Maybe you're focused on your child.
So he's probably if he's no, certainly you're right. That's meaning in that sense it's true. If the child is going to distract the father to the point that he's not going to be able to do Birchat Kohanim, that's a problem. Right, then he should think of another solution. Maybe do Birchat Kohanim. I don't know.
I guess my point is that it's an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old. That's one thing.
Right.
2-year-old.
The 2-year-old is much harder. Right. So again, but also there are 2-year-olds and there are 2-year-olds. Meaning sometimes you have. I remember when my oldest son was 2. Rav Shafter, I was an assistant rabbi in Shari Tefillah in Lawrence. Rav Shafter was there for a Shabbos, and he said to me, "Don't you have a son?" I said, because my son wasn't there, he was 2. So I said, yeah, but he's 2. So Shafter said, does he know how to sit quietly? I said, yeah, he actually, my oldest son is the one where you could just sit him down and he would just, till you tell him to move, he wouldn't move. He would just sit there like that. Like he's very obedient. He's like the excellent husband, right? So he just does as he's told. So he said if he knows how to sit quietly, you should bring him to shul. I mean, you have to know your kid. If he can't, then you don't, and if he can, then you do. Sometimes you make a trial of a Shabbos afternoon mincha instead of the 2.5 hour davening in the morning. But yeah, if the father's distracted, then that's going to be a problem. The father should be distracted. So the Chassid London and Manchester, the Shraga Hameir, who speaks very, very forcefully about not having children up there. But again, he's speaking forcefully because it's against the Pashup Shabbat Shulchan Aruch. So he has to make a big point of it to justify that practice. And he says, even though the Shulchan Aruch passes like Tosfos, I pass like Rashi, and Rashi says not that way. Okay, allow each community to have their practice. I'm following you, leave it at the moment. One more?
Take one more from the submitted, and then
one more from the submitted. Okay, so let's say if I'm in the middle of the Amida, should I stop and listen to Birchat Kohanim? So Rav Moshe has a tshuva about this. Rav Moshe finds a tshuva about this, and he says that it really depends on whether you hold that the recipients of the bracha have a mitzvah to receive the bracha. Meaning, if I have no mitzvah to receive the bracha, it's just a mitzvah of Kohanim to give the bracha. So then, why should I stop in the middle of my mitzvah for the bracha to be received? But if I have a mitzvah to receive the bracha, then I should stop to be able to receive it. Now, what would you do? You would just stop and listen. Now, there is an opinion of Tosfos and Maseches Brachos, who don't pass the mic, who holds that if, let's say, they're up to Kedusha and you're in the middle of Shemona Esrei, Tosfos says you can't just stop and listen because we have a principle called Shomea Ka'on, that when you listen, it's as if you yourself are saying, and you're not allowed to speak in the middle of your Shemona Esrei. So you can't be listening in the middle of Shemona Esrei. We don't pass like that. We pass when you're supposed to stop and listen to Kedusha also. But Rav Moshe writes, even according to Tosfos for Birchat Kohanim, it's fine. Because there's no mitzvah for the Yisrael to say Birchat Kohanim. The whole mitzvah is only to hear the Birchat Kohanim. So as long as he's hearing it, he's not being mafsik. There's no shomea kit on it. It's not like he's saying anything. He's just being shomea because that's his entire mitzvah. Is just to be shomea is just to listen. So the proper thing to do if you're in the middle of Shemona Esrei is to pause and listen. Yeah. If you position behind the Kohanim, there's no sense in pausing and listening because you're not getting the bracha anyway. You also can't move. in the middle of Shemona. Ramosha writes, there are certain things you're allowed to move in the middle of Shemona Esrei for. We often think of like having our feet together it is important. You're supposed to keep your feet together in the middle of Shemona Esrei. There are certain circumstances where you're allowed to move, and it doesn't. You're not Shemona Esrei again. Just move. I had a like someone told me they're over the Chazan's bima, and they heard rattle around, like is there an earthquake or something? And they saw there was a squirrel running around and somehow snuck into some hole. It was running around in the chandelier, and everyone's looking like in the middle of Shemona Esrei and Muslim. Everyone's looking at the squirrel, and then all of a sudden the squirrel lands on the floor in the shul and starts running around, and it's the middle of Shemona Esrei. So the Chazan was the first one out of it. People were trying to like capture it with their talis, and they were trying to bait it with crackers. Why do they have crackers on their camera? No one was asking questions at this point. So in that sense, what's the right thing to do? You get out of shul and continue Shemona Esrei from where you are. Maybe if you're afraid of the squirrel, you leave, and then you continue Shemona Esrei from where you are. But for Birchat Kohanim, you would not be allowed to move. You wouldn't be allowed to go if you're in the middle of Shemona Esrei. Okay, so now maybe we'll take some questions from the audience, and then we'll wrap it.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask a question, and I'll Maddie take some questions for you, Lebowitz. What would you say if a Kohen is the Shliach Tzibur? Most of the Shliach Tzibur, what do they do? How do they act? Is that something that?
So I wrote a book.
Are you taking back the book?
This is the book, and it's described to Morgan. And if you just read through chapter, where is it? It's in this. Here it is, chapter 26 of this book. So it's only about 12 pages long, and I go through the different opinions of what to do. We had this problem in my shul. Because not the problem. The only person when we started the shul 18 years ago, and there were like 12 of us, that started the shul. So we happened to have it was a perfect group because there was one guy who was an expert Bal Koreh, and one person who was an expert Gabbai, and one person there was one guy who was good at running things, an expert president. It was a great thing. The only thing is our excellent Bal Tefillah who could daven Geshem. Was a Kohen. So ideally, in Chutz La'aretz, you would say, okay, let someone who's not a Kohen do it. But what if he's your best Bal Tefillah? So here, Sikum. I'll read you the last paragraph. If they want specifically that a Kohen should be the Shliach Tzibur, and there are other Kohanim to do it. Is that what you're asking? There are near a Pashat Shaladina, Mutter LeKohen Zel L'Shamish Shliach Tzibur, ve'ein tzrichim lahakbid shashatz yadafka Yisrael. That Kohen can be a Shliach Tzibur. The Shliach Tzibur does not have to be Yisrael. But there's a netlaku gedolei poskim im adif lo levarich me'achar shebetuach lachsa l'tfila or adif shelo levarich. There is a machlok poskim whether he should do it. The reason not to do it is that he might get confused. And it will be difficult for him to go back to the tefillah to finish up Chazar Sashat. So some say, now they're not going to get confused because there's a machzah. It used to be that it would be confusing because they're going to lose their groove and they're not going to be able to get back into it. If he does bless the tzibur, sarich lakar ragel b'risei. He has to move his feet b'risei because Kohen that is not, like we said before, that does not lakar ragel b'risei can't do it. There's a further dispute whether he actually goes up to the ducha. Minuk rova olam shalol that he stays where he is, just turns around. Yaakov raglav ma'at. And then there's a further machlokas of poskim. Nechlu poskim after shamakri yisrael nikri kolbus kaim im esayim b'zeh shashatz atzmi esayim b'sim shalom or shamakri esayim gam b'sim shalom. Once the Kohen is not going to be the one calling out the words of Birchat Kohanim, should he finish Sim Shalom? So that's a further machlokas hamoskim. Bottom line is, read all about it. There are many different things.
Do you mention whether with shoes or without shoes? Take his shoes up. What do we do, Dan? What's our minute?
So I would know to wash before the
Wash before Hazara, right?
Shoes on, don't do it.
shoes on the
No,
nose.
don't do it, right? You know,
Morty, we have one of our chasanim, he comes in, I think he goes out, he washes, I asked him, I talked to him about it. He washes before Chazar Sashatz, he does duchen, and I think he does he take his shoes off? No, I don't remember. No,
there is, I think, a
Shoes on.
Syrian minhag not to take shoes off the cloth, which is a very straight. Because actually gets really, for to never take shoes off, it really gets the halach. But in that case, that's interesting.
Our father actually, I don't know if it's so much about us, but he had Birchat.
Okay.
So he dove in and someone else was the Magri. I think he made, I don't remember if he finished. He was in terms of separate helpers and jumped around, always keeping his feet together.
Right.
We don't tie his shoes before he starts.
It's like the same thing as Simmer has when they got a bow.
Right.
I think I'm sure when they asked me to jump and turn around.
Yeah, that's what he did.
Richie.
During the
Doesn't
updates,
really work.
except when, correct me if I'm wrong, the message was one or fewer. The only Kohen that we would during the days, was only one other Kohen who would. Hey, what is the reason why Kohen did not go during the days here? And if there's a prohibition, how is that called out as an exception when there's one or fewer?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. My impression is, I don't remember, but my impression is that first of all, it happens to be the Kohanim have a very hard time with that practice and not duching when available. So that's the time they want to duchen more than any other time usually, because very often they're navilas for a father who passed on their kahuna to them, and they they want to connect in that way. But we have to follow the rules. The idea, I think, is that the needs of the tzibur override the need of the individuals. Even though, from an individual perspective, he's not going to be able to feel the proper sense of yishuv hadas, we assume, during the avelus, and of calm serenity to be able to be mevarich in the proper frame of mind. So that's what we're nervous about. But when the tzibur needs Birchat Kohanim and Birchat Kohanim midaraisa, so that would override. I think that's the basis. But I don't remember.
There's no other Kohen I understand that. Again, my understanding is that there's one.
Yeah, because when there's only one, it could be that that's not the chiyuv d'oraisa Ramban. So we need for multiple Kohanim.
Yeah. You go out to wash, and you talk before you do.
So that would be submitted that question. You did? Okay. So strictly speaking, yes, but first of all, you're not supposed to talk to him because of Sashatz. That's also,
And Chopra, and I'm Rosh Hashanah.
also, I mentioned earlier that there are some that try to watch as late as they possibly can to minimize the hefsek. So if they're talking, that's going to create another hefsek. However, like strictly speaking, there are some Kohanim that we don't say. If you watch the morning, these are really already clean. So layer, so we're allowed for like a significant hefsek. So the hefsek is not the biggest deal in the world, between the washing and the Birchat Kohanim. But again, yeah, it's supposed to.
But I shake someone's hand.
So that probably should.
During Birchat Kohanim, the Chazi pulls out several words, and there are sentences after those words. I always say those sentences, but nobody else does.
Right.
So why
Yeah.
are they there?
So someone said, they put they put it in really small letters, and if you read it carefully, it's not saying these words. Here, that didn't suggest not listening to the call.
So why don't you just take them over?
It's a good question.
I'm sorry, Andy, go ahead.
What about a Kohen after he's davening and he comes down after Kaddish? Can he put his shoes on? / Can he touch his shoes?
What's the deal with tying shoes afterwards?
Right, so there is a practice that we have throughout the year that when we touch shoes, we ideally should wash our hands. I think we're very makel with that. Rabbi Birchat is very makel with all these, if you scratch your head, they gotta wash his hands right after. That was when people showered once every 3 months. If you scratch your head, your hands were filthy. When you were walking on mud floors all day, so touch your shoes. So we rely on doing this or something like that. I think it's such a big deal. I was once with Birchat in the OU office, and someone asked if the Kohen could wear crazy socks because they're distracting.
Okay, happen.
So I actually wrote about that in my sefer also, crazy socks. You're allowed to. I'm not sure it's true. I mean, it shouldn't be inappropriate. I'll say that. It shouldn't have. It shouldn't be inappropriate.
There's a minion in our community that did not have a Kohen, that had to be woman. And two things, like, are they required? Is there a chiyuv for them to go and find Kohen? And me being Kohen, besides me being chesed, besides that, but
is probably depends whether the tzibur says that they do have a mitzvah to be mispareh, and he just says, and all the poskim quote, and he doesn't quote that anyone really argues. So even though people do argue, and clearly we showed them argue, it seems that the tzibur should make an effort to try to have a birchas kohanim, even though you're not required to do it. So it seems that the tzibur should try to make some sort of.
It's just as to conclude. Oh, your last question.
I do have one quick question, but you've sort of talked about it, but I'm still confused.
Okay.
The Ribon Shalom, Chalam, and everything. Are you really supposed to say it, or are you supposed to sort of listen to the Kohanim unless you need to say it?
So no, when the Kohanim are singing and they're just chanting
when
the
they're
tune,
singing.
that's when you say.
But there's usually not enough time to say that.
So you
Okay,
can
I
split
got
it up.
You
That's
split
what
it
I'm
up.
saying, split it up.
The paragraph is going to say after Birchat Kohanim, you want to show. I don't know if I'm the only person, but the minhag, my minhag was to finish that bracha, that paragraph, the same exact time, Sim Shalom is in.
Yeah, that's my minhag too, because he told me that.
I think it says in Shulchan Aruch like that.
What's just to finish it up? What's your psak? We're taking your psak here. Kohanim, listen up. What's your psak on not sak? What's your psak on the last singing part with the shalom? Because you do have the bigger. You alluded to it, the smaller paragraph, then you have the bigger paragraph. Do you add that extra half stanza into the singing? Do you do da ya ya? Do you do it again to allow the kehila to say the rest? What do they do in basic knesses?
I think it's proper to give. The whole idea of birchas kohanim is ba'ahava. It's supposed to be done with love. And if you know that people want to say it's tefillah, they want to have time to say it, they want to feel pressure to finish it. So give them the opportunity to say it. You don't lose anything by singing an extra 20 seconds.
Yeah,
is that the right answer?
Sure, guys, that's the right answer. Do it.
Let me just close with this. I had an experience over Yantiv. I had an experience, and it's really along the same theme. Before Yantiv, you are a very, very caring and loving and amazing rabbi. I am not a very caring and loving and amazing rabbi. And there are situations in my shul and in people's families that I'm not even aware of as much as I should be, and I should be involved much more than I am. So what I'll often do is before Yom Novayim, I'll send them an email to the shul that please, email me privately. I want to be able to daven for you. I want to be able to daven for your family. I want our shliach tzibur to have you in mind, to have your family in mind. Please send us your name to daven for. And I give we make a laminated list, and we give it to the shliach tzibur, to the balmos of the Baal Shachris, Baal Tokeya, and I often again, it's probably because I'm not doing my job. but I'll often discover many tzaros in the community that I was unaware of. If not directly to community members, then family members of community members. And on Yom Tov, on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, one of the Kohanim in shul, someone who has unquestionable use. It is really, you would all recognize his last name. And he came over to me and he said, meaning we're the vehicles for this great bracha. We're feeling this overwhelming sense of love for the tzibur. I would like to have kavana for all of these people. Then when I'm saying Yasim Shalom, I want people to have shalom bayis. I want them to have shalom from that which torments them, whether it be the difficulties in parnasa, whether it be difficulties with health, whether it be, with sargi bottom, with all those things. I want to feel that sense. And I was so moved that a Kohen was asking that because it was coming from a place of, it really matters to me. Like when I say that I'm blessing the Jewish people, ba'ava, I'm doing it with a full heart. And I want to do it as full a heart as I possibly can. And ultimately, the greatest blessing is if every Kohen felt that way and every Israel and Levi received it that way. We should feel that sense of ava, mutual ava for each other and for all of Israel. And God willing, when we reach that lofty goal, we'll be ready to have and speeches like the Sheikh
Downstairs, actually in the social hall in 5 minutes. 5 minutes.